Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada Sportsbook.
Welcome to Game Over Montreal. It's me, Andrew Berkshire, with Marc Dumont. The Laval Rocket are ahead 6-3. They're keeping the playoff dream alive. And that's something the Canadiens could not do for the Pittsburgh Penguins right tonight against the New York Islanders. Marc brought this up while we were getting ready for the show. The Penguins lost to the Canadiens 3 times this year. That's the difference between them making and not making it. And
well, hold on, Andrew. They lost 4 times against the Habs this year because of the Jeff Petrie trade.
Right. Okay. 4 L's against the Montreal Canadiens from the Pittsburgh Penguins this year. That's brutal. I got to say, you know what's going to happen, Marc, is the Canadiens are setting the stage to show Sidney Crosby the Penguins can't take care of him anymore. And when the Canadiens are ready to compete, an aged Sidney Crosby is going to be the guy who joins the team.
He'll be
them over the edge.
The wind beneath Nick Suzuki's wings, as Barbara Streisand would so eloquently put it. Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
Who does it? Who
and Ovechkin
bet on
and Ovechkin.
40-year-old Crosby?
How about both Ovechkin and Crosby signed sweetheart deals
with
the Habs? Because, you know, Ovechkin always said if he'd play anywhere else, it'd be Montreal. Sidney Crosby grew up loving Montreal. We're going to will this into, we're going to have the Suzuki, Ovechkin, and Crosby line. Sorry, Crosby, you got to play wing. Sorry, my man, but that's how it's going to go.
I mean, it's a nice consolation for probably not getting Bedard, right? As you can get the last generation's franchise players to come on, and they could be your second line, I guess. But
yeah, absolutely. And Claire is pointing out, and I did screw that up. It was on Beaches. Yeah, it was Bette Midler, not Barbara Streisand. She's absolutely right. I'm messing up my 90s icons, but that was definitely Bette Midler. And I did watch Beaches recently, so you know.
Yeah, I don't know. Noel's talking about something here.
We can get to that. Yeah, we can get to that in a little bit.
I think this is something that I missed.
Oh yeah, we were talking about because basically, essentially, what you're saying is at least women's hockey is a bastion of there's no bigotry, anything like that, and that was my impression too. And we'll get it real quick for women's hockey, but when you get into the politics of it, it's everywhere, man, and it's in women's hockey as well, unfortunately. So there's been locker rooms that have been spread out. There's been really off comments by those playing with Kunlun in China. So anyways, that's not the vibe that we're going for now. We're going for a fun vibe. Hey, the season's almost over. There's still some fun to talk about. And how about, we're not going to get into it, but I need to tease-dale it. How about that Nick Suzuki?
My God. Yeah, we're definitely going to be talking about that. But before we do, we got to get in on the action with Sports Interaction. Make your bet. Every hit, every shot, every goal from your favorite teams and players with competitive odds, the best live in play, and more ways than ever to get into the game. Like Minute Madness, our exclusive game with so many opportunities to win by the minute. Download the app in Ontario, use the QR code you see at the bottom of the screen right now, or head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN to get started. All right, Marc, should we just get right into Nick Suzuki, because why waste time?
Yeah. Hey, now that was like a look, I don't want to pile on to Penguins fans, but that was a Crosby-esque goal.
It was 100%.
Like that effort level. And listen, Bolduc,
not the best defense.
He's the kind of guy that would go hiking in areas where there's mountain lions and would never realize that there's one like right behind him. But yeah, that was a Crosby-esque goal. And for those saying that he held the stick, he absolutely held the stick. But if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. And in that case, it was so quick and so slick that Nick held his stick and scored a very nice goal. That's the kind of stuff that I look forward to seeing, with no offense to his line mates. But man, could you picture Nick Suzuki? Of course, he's not going to miss a game, but could you picture his line mates not missing a game? He got to 25 goals, 65 points on that? That's pretty impressive, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's super impressive. And like you mentioned, yeah, he did hold the stick. We should also mention that he held the stick because it was going to be a hook, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because Bolduc didn't use his body to block the lane, so he had to use his stick. That would have been called hooking, if anything, before the hold the stick. And also, if you watch that replay, you can watch Suzuki waits for the referee to go off to the side and kind of stop. And when the ref is even with Bolduc's body, that's when he reaches in. And listen, sure, it's against the rules, but That's savvy. That's just smart playing right
He
there.
underestimated Nick Suzuki's sneakiness there, sir. But yeah, and I've got something with the way he can send weighted goals. Like, you know what I mean? It's not always full force. Like the way he can float goals in, and he does it during his shootout move too. Man, that's some magic slick Nick stuff going on right there. It's fun to see. This is a guy basically entering his prime as well. So once you can get a little more stability on the injured reserve, I think just great things for Nick Suzuki. And I see arguments on the Twitter machine, Andrew, saying that he's not a number 1C, et cetera, et cetera. Very few players would do better than what he did with Mike Hoffman on the wing for half the season on a bottom basement team. Let's be perfectly honest here. Like, he's playing in a tough situation.
He is 100%, and always against top competition. You know, especially with Kirby Dach out, like no other center can handle what he's doing on this team.
No.
The Canadiens are essentially running to the end of the season with their first and fourth line centers in the lineup. You know, Joe Drouin doing his very best playing center when he really shouldn't be. Although, like, his point production, man, it's pretty solid the second half of the season, I have to say.
It's been great. And I really would love to talk about signing him again, but I can't get through the wall of insults that come at you whenever you suggest, like, hey, this guy's not bad, you know, and people are still just too emotionally attached. I think we both agree it's best for Jonathan Drouin to move on at this point.
Yeah, I think it's best for him for sure. I think he could benefit from going somewhere where the spotlight isn't so negative on him right from the outset.
Yeah.
One thing I'd like to do maybe in the off season, we'll try to get Alan Walsh, who's part of the network here at SDPN, try to get him on. Maybe we'll try to get Drouin on as well and just like talk about his experience in Montreal, not trying to like delve into any secrets or anything like that, but just like share his side of the story kind of thing and like how things felt, how much things affected him, what he wants to do for the rest of his career, that kind of stuff. Because I feel like he's a guy that's just so eminently likable, but because the Canadiens don't really give access to like good interviews, we don't get to see that side of him. So people just focus on the negatives, and there's no human element to like stop them from digging in. So maybe we'll try to make that happen for like a special episode in the off season.
Yeah, if I may, which would be amazing. And I love Jonathan Noah, and much love to him. The last year during the summer, at one point, I got sent out to just cover. It was a hockey de rue, so ball hockey thing going on with the Habs charity, and it was Nick Suzuki and Jonathan Drouin. And we'll be on, like, I love Nick Suzuki, obviously, not the most boisterous person, let's put it that way, right? Like with dealing with kids. But Jonathan Drouin really took the lead there. And when he was talking to the kids, he took time for every single kid that stood in line. And also, I'll mention this, he was rehabbing his wrist. So what he decided to do, because you have exercises when you have to rehab your wrist, he decided to forego the exercises that day. And because I'm an idiot, and he told me, I can't sign, I have to do my rehab. And the first thing I do is I hand him a pen and paper, and I'm like, here you go, Joe, like, start signing. And he's like, he didn't even hesitate. He started doing it. It clicks in my mind. I'm like, wow, you're an idiot. Well, more than usual. And he's like, that's fine. I just won't do my rehab tonight. Instead, signing cards for these kids will be my rehab because that's more important. So like, it was just his level of engagement. And I'm not taking anything away from Nick. Nick did great there. But Jonathan Drouin's level of engagement and just his genuine care for what these kids were telling him was fantastic. And, I'm not saying he put his body on the line or anything, but obviously for him, it was very important to make these kids' day. So I agree, they don't give enough access for stuff like that. But when you get to see it, Jonathan Drouin is nothing but pure goodness.
Yeah, so we'll try to set that up. I mean, he'll be a unrestricted free agent soon, so I'm assuming that the Canadiens won't be able to block it like they've blocked other things. We won't.
Yeah, which is unfortunate because you know what? Like, just from a purely statistical standpoint, if you can get him on a sweetheart deal, that's great value, man. And you saw, now that he's healthy, there's been a resurgence. Like, he wants to prove the world too. He's proud. He wants to prove to people like I'm not done. So it's a shame, but I just don't see it happening in Montreal.
Yeah, I totally agree. All right, I did want to talk about a few things that happened from this game. Obviously, the other goal was from Rem Pitlick, but I think Jake Evans deserves a lot of the credit for that goal.
My boy Jake, love Jake, and hey man, he's one of the guys that need to reassert his place, and he's done it, man. He's done it.
Yeah, he has. I mean, he's been great since he came back. It seemed like the coaching staff breaking up that Evans Gallagher connection kind of threw both players out for a loop a little bit, but putting them back together tonight, they were on it again.
I didn't even check the numbers though, but they were running at about like 65% expected GF when they were playing together, which is like that's Tatar Dano Gallagher numbers, right? So yeah, I'm excited to see what that can happen. And a lot of people won't like the idea of Gallagher on the third making that much, but hey, if he's contributing, there's value there.
There is, and people just don't need to stress about like who's making what where. It's the total sum of the team being cap compliant that really matters. And
Bingo,
if a player is
bango.
making a huge amount of money and not contributing, that's a problem. But if Gallagher is playing the way he is lately, making 6.5, I don't think it's really that much of a big deal.
And they're the only line that was above, or they led the team in the shot attempts, the differential. And as much as I love Rem Pitlick, he's rarely on the positive side of 50% there. So, that's a good sign for those two. Yeah.
Yeah, it is true. All right. But speaking of Gallagher, what did you think of the knee when he was trying to cover for the defenseman? And I got to say, the broadcast said that he stuck his knee out once he realized he was going to miss the hit.
I don't think he did.
I watched it about 20 times, Mark, and he planted and went for a hit. And I forget who the Islanders player was, but he moved out of the way and like evaded the hit, but couldn't pull his leg through, and their knees clicked. Now, totally fine with the penalty, but there was a bunch of people saying like, "Oh, Gallagher's going to get a call from the league."
Oh no,
I don't think he's going to get a call from the league.
I think it was his first and worst attempt at a hip check. Is what we saw. What we saw.
Well, his arms go out, right? He's trying to hit.
Absolutely no, and I will say this because it kind of reminds me of what was the name of the Texas when Texas was playing the Blue Jays there, and what's his face ran right up to Jose Bautista, Roughneck Odor, and Bautista just kept his arms down, and Odor just came in with a punch. Look, if you're gonna run at someone like Pajot did, Gallagher's gonna react with pushing you off. You don't go run up to someone face to face if you don't want a little bit of Sherwood in your teeth. That's a hockey rule right there.
Yeah, it reminds me of who was the guy that Philadelphia used to always have. He was they'd call him up just to like dirty hit guys. He was terrible.
Bobby Clark?
No. He was like a smaller guy, but he was built like a tank, and he would just run guys constantly. And I remember
there's four.
I know. It was like the end of a season, and he tried to run like Nathan Beaulieu, and Beaulieu was like a rookie.
Oh, Beaulieu!
And at the last second, Beaulieu just got his stick up and got him right in the face. Absolutely. And I was like, yes!
No, absolutely. Hey, there's a cool message here from Veritas Invicta. So one thing that the Habs did, not this game, I don't believe it was the last one, was they put up a video of like 50 years of history between the Islanders and the Canadiens, and it's pretty cool because the Habs get tons of credit for having those dynasties, but in my opinion, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, Montreal, but the Islanders dynasties like rivaled the Habs in terms of overall quality. They kind of got caught up with other dynasties there, and obviously the Oilers were in play, but it was a really cool video, and I think there's a sense of respect between both franchises. So that was pretty cool to see that the Habs would do something out of the blue, just to kind of show the respect for the Islanders.
Yeah, I mean, the Canadiens dynasty would have gone on longer if it weren't for the New York Islanders.
That's exactly it. And so they stopped the Habs and they ran into the Oilers essentially. But man, those were some damn good teams in New York. Those were just some, they don't get the respect they deserve when we talk about dynasties in the NHL.
Yeah, I mean, they have the unfortunate situation of being sandwiched between two Canadian dynasties, right? The best of the 70s and then the best of the 80s and the Oilers. But I mean, you could argue that the Islanders were a better team than the Oilers were, despite not having Wayne Gretzky, because they're still the last team to win 3 in a row, let alone 4 in a row.
Oh, yeah.
And I know it was a different world back then, but like still, they were an expansion team not long before then, right? Like they took a while to be built, but like 4 in a row.
No, absolutely. And you're looking
at very
few
teams in history have done that.
Yeah, exactly. And just some of the players, when it's funny because you and me always talk about the Leafs and kind of, no offense, Leafs fans, but there's not a ton of history there in terms of like great players. Like, you have your Boris Sal. Anyways, I don't want to get into it, but the Islanders, I can start knocking off, whether we talk about one of the most underrated goal scorers in team history or one of the most underrated defensemen in history who comes from my hometown, Denis Potvin, so there's a lot of talent there. And probably I'd say It's hard to say as a Habs fan, but probably the most underrated goal scorer in history played for the New York Islanders. That's for sure.
Mike Bossy?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I wouldn't call him underrated.
Really?
I think he's properly rated. Maybe not for like kids, but I think in media circles he's properly rated.
Is he? Because he's got to be like top 3 goal scorer in the history of the NHL. I put him right there with Gretzky and Ovechkin, in my opinion.
I mean, adjusted for era, I think he's number 1. That high. I mean, he's below Mario.
Is he? I don't think so.
Well,
I think Bossy
for
actually
sure.
goes up when you adjust for era, don't you? Doesn't he?
Hmm?
I think Bossy actually, in terms of just like goals per game or per opportunity, is right there, like top 3 when you adjust for era. We'll have to look into it.
I don't think so.
We'll have to
Because
look
he
into
played
it.
in the highest scoring era in league history.
Well, yeah, but until 86, right? He didn't ride it out completely, right? Like his
No,
prime.
but he also didn't have a chance to decline, right?
His prime was like probably closer early 80s, late 70s, if we're being perfectly honest. And 9 years, right? So I think, or 10 years, either way. What is it? 500.
He was a incredible player, and also I think
75 goals in 750 games. Like that is absolutely ridiculous. That scoring rate can't be beat. Let's put it that way. Obviously, Gretzky did it for much longer, for much better. But yeah, Mike Bossy, I think, probably deserves a little more credit. Although Andrew disagrees. To hear that,
I think he, as a goal scorer, properly rated. Where he deserves more credit is the people who call him soft are morons.
Oh, people call him soft?
Oh yeah, because he was not a tough guy, but the stuff that he went through in order to score those goals is ridiculous.
People do the dumbest thing. Who's the name of the Oilers player who read about himself being called soft? Late 90s, early 2000s Oilers player. He was really good, always injured, constantly injured.
Alex Hemsky.
And he read about that, and he was like, man, I can't believe people are calling me soft. Like, this guy was not soft. I'll be perfectly honest, if he wasn't European, I don't think he would have gotten that soft tag, but he was injured a lot because he went into high, like danger zone,
Yep.
He was going straight to the Kenny Loggins zone, and that's why he got called soft, because he got injured. But Alex Hemsky was kind of like Mike Bossy, the opposite of soft.
Yeah, exactly. He had like that Taylor Hall-itis where he was like, I'll just skate with my head down and get crushed going into dangerous areas, but he was willing to do it over and over again to get things done. And yeah, Alex Hemsky is I think a super underrated guy from his era. But we're playing Remember Some Guys now. We're supposed to be talking about the Canadiens and the Islanders. You know who's kind of underrated from the Islanders is Potvin, who you brought up for sure, is super underrated, I think, in terms of all-time defensemen.
Mm-hmm.
But Trottier, I feel
Brian
like Trottier is underrated.
Big time. Didn't he have like a bunch of 100-point seasons? Like, he's at one point he went from like 120 points a year to maybe 110 points a year in 5 years. That's pretty darn impressive. I'm telling you, man, that Islanders team and Trottier, what he did, he had like Mike Gardner like longevity. He went on for. Brian Trottier retired last year, I'm pretty sure, is how it went. So yeah, no, absolutely. Let me look up his overall point a game, man. Yeah, there's that era of so many amazing players that we're starting to forget now, but Trottier is a very, very good one. I agree.
Yeah, great players on those Islanders teams. I look forward to seeing what they can do in the playoffs as a wild card team with Sorokin there. But I got to tell you, Mark, the third period tonight where they just decided to sit on a 1-goal lead wasn't fun hockey.
Not reassuring for a playoff run. I don't know how Islanders fans feel. You can let us know in the chat. And by the way, shout out to the chat, all our regular amazing people. We have Noel here. Anyways, they're all here. We're not going to go through it, but that to me, I guess if you're sitting pretty and you're just trying to nest that egg, I get it, but not a confidence boosting game going into the playoffs, was it?
No, I mean, I guess it depends on how you feel about it, right? Because I think they have another game to close things out after this one. So I think so.
I think that's it, man. I think that's it.
Is it for them?
We did our research.
Played 81. Also, I could be wrong.
Butch Goring and John Tonelli are two other guys that we should have mentioned as just like being super underrated for the New York Islanders. Islanders, that's it, man. They're clinched. So the only thing that can happen at this point is if Florida wins, they're going to go to first wild card, and the Islanders will drop to last wild card.
This is true. All right. So I want to ask. I'm going to use Trizak's question here, because he had one up earlier
Trinka
in the stream. No, it was Trizak, not Trinka. We're not going to confuse them tonight. And first of all, I got to say, everybody who's enjoying the show tonight, make sure that you like the stream, because it helps the show grow, helps YouTube's algorithm suggest us to other people. Hey, and if you really like it, you can follow SDPN on YouTube. You can share the link for this show on your favorite social media of choice right this second. And if you tag us, we'll retweet you, all that stuff, or we'll shout you out, all the cool stuff that we can do to make you feel part of the show. But Trizak asked, what was the better, or I think he said prettier. Let's see what did he say.
I like where this is going already.
He said, what was the sexier shorthanded goal?
Sexier all of a sudden. Wow,
Suzuki...
we're getting hot and horny over here, aren't we?
All right, Jake Allen, calm down. Was it Suzuki tonight or Paul Byron in the playoffs? Game
Paul Byron
one
in the playoffs.
against
Paul Byron in the
Leafs.
playoffs. First of all, it hurt the Leafs. I mean, come on, there's value there. No. First of all, the picture of him on one knee, he switched knees, mid-knee, one-handed, short-handed, game-winning goal in the third period to crush the hopes and dreams of the Toronto Maple Leafs. It is Paul Byron. I love Nick Suzuki, but that Paul Byron moment was, and I hate this word, epic. That was just fantastic. You know, it's the kind of thing where slow-mo, you can hear the bulbs flashing, even though I don't think cameras use bulbs anymore. Yeah, Paul Byron all the way.
Yeah, and I want to hear from the chat on this one too. I'm gonna look through, but
I mean, Suzuki's was technically higher, but don't forget.
That's what I was going to say.
Or no, who was the goalie? I forget, but they actually deflected the Byron shot, so it actually rode up off the stick.
It was Campbell. It was Campbell.
So, exactly.
I mean,
the number one goalie in Edmonton.
Points in favor of Suzuki's goal. I feel like it was a higher degree of difficulty to get that shot off.
Yes.
And also, like, because he's not as fast as Byron, I think it's more impressive to chase that puck down.
Mm-hmm.
Also, he scored it on a real goalie.
I feel, you know what's the worst? Because Campbell's such a nice guy. He's genuinely a nice guy. But yeah, that's I will say it's that because you're chasing down a defenseman too. Like there's someone between you, absolutely skill wise. But if you're gonna write a movie, you're putting the Paul Byron one in there 1,000 times over. So
Paul Byron chasing down a loose puck one-on-one with the defender is electrifying every single time.
Absolutely.
Like, his speed is just absurd. Like, I'd love to see... I know what makes McDavid special isn't the straight line speed. It's like the ability to react to like stimulus and change angles and everything. But Paul Byron, I don't know who could actually outskate Paul Byron in a straight.
He's the fastest kid alive.
Yeah, like I mean, now obviously with the hip injuries, maybe not, but Paul Byron in his Montreal Canadiens prime era, straight on, I don't think there's a guy in the league who was faster.
At better outright speed. And I will say this, just genuinely good guy, because not only we were both claimed off waivers by the Habs, you know, at one point, so we have that together, but he was one of the dudes that I remember I was having a hard time over in Brassard. I was just like idly sitting in a field kind of figuring my life out, and he stopped and just to see how I was doing, like, hey man, are you okay? Just want to check up on you, which kind of caught me off guard because I wasn't looking for anything like that. But yeah, Paul Byron, genuine good person. Same thing with his wife and his beautiful children. So yeah, shout out to the Byron crew. I really hope for him, because there's few people that worked harder to make it to the NHL and few that worked harder to stay here. And he literally put his body on the line for this team. So I hope that there's a path to hockey in his future. And if not, just a path to happiness, right? Because Paul Byron deserves it.
Yeah, I wonder, just because you see Paul Byron around still, like in the press box, despite the fact that he's like essentially missed the entire season.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's a spot for him just in and around the team in some capacity. He seems like a really intelligent guy, the kind of guy that maybe it pays dividends to keep him around.
And if you want to, because someone spoke to me today about a skills coach. I know guys like Suzuki worked with Barb Underhill for skating, but if you want someone pure speed, like I was always of the opinion that the Habs should hire Guy Carbonneau, but you don't let him do anything except you work in this 4-foot box, you drop pucks and you take face-offs all day long versus our guys. Same thing with Paul Byron. He can absolutely be a skating consultant, but I think for him, the goal now is to kind of reestablish his career. We'll see how it goes. I'm not hearing great things, but again, few people will work harder to make it back in the league.
Yeah, for sure. Eugene Lungo had a point earlier on. He remembered the name of the guy who I was thinking of, which was Zach Ronaldo. Which, if you remember the Twitter meme of like, there's only one guy on this team who has heart, Romaldo.
And didn't he get suspended like 6 games, like right away? It was like
all the time.
Zach's on the ice, Zach's suspended. Zach's on the ice, Zach's suspended.
He's absolute garbage can of a player.
Absolutely.
He was out there with one goal, and it was to injure people, and that was it. But he also brings up that The Athletic did an article. Oh no, wait, no, that was K actually. It says also the Athletic article on Byron says that his teammates view him as being a future GM. So clearly,
Smart guy. Smart
smart
guy.
guy.
Now, unfortunately, he ended up going to the same bars as I did when he was younger. But that's a good sign. It goes to show that it's not what you do when you're younger that affects your outcome in life. You can still make it out, even if you go to places like Le Boom Doublon in Hull. Andrew, this is before it was called Get Snow. It was called Hull. You had to do Hull like that. And
I remember that.
he went to some
We definitely just
seedy-
said Hull though.
Yeah,
Because I grew up in Western Canada.
yeah. And these were like the seediest bars where everyone from Ontario go over because it was 18 in Quebec. And that's where he met his beautiful wife. So, it works out for some people. Small percentage, but Paul Byron, he can make it work.
He can. He made it work for the Canadians. He made it work in small town Franco, Ontario.
Right?
One thing that we were going to do here before the end of the show that I just want to tease right now for everyone to give them a reason to stick
The
around.
Teasdale it?
The Teasdale. Yeah. We're going to talk about what we think the starting lineup is going to look like next season. But before we do that, I got to bring in some got to talk about the negatives a little bit.
Okay, but real quick, Rocket won, so 6-3 final.
Hey, the Laval Rocket, they're going to make the playoffs.
I said this to Andrew. Let me know what you think in the chat. I bet you if Raphaël Harvey-Pinard was in the game tonight, Montreal wins because there were so many loose pucks that were like pure Harvey-Pinard bait, and Laval loses. I swear to God, I don't. Maybe I'm putting too much power into this guy's hands, but this felt like a Raphaël Harvey-Pinard kind of swing game, and good for Laval. But yeah, I think he would have done good tonight against the Islanders.
Well, he had 5 assists today, apparently.
No, really 5?
5 assists for Raphael Harvey-Pinard.
Hey.
1, 2, 3 primary assists.
Jeez.
What a killer.
And
yeah, Anthony Richard
Richard.
hat trick.
Exactly. So, by the way, I know Frédéric Allard's not playing much, and we're going to get to our starting lineup, but I thought he was okay again. I don't get why he's not playing a ton in Laval, but both times he's been in Montreal, he's been okay.
Yeah, he's looked good. He actually, obviously he's not playing the highest leverage minutes in Montreal, but he's getting the job done.
Yeah,
so
no, absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
He seems like a solid dude. I don't know what his future holds, but the Canadiens just have so many good B level prospects at defense. It's going to be really interesting to see who makes it out of that onto the roster. But we got to talk negatives a little bit. A couple things that I noticed tonight that I did not like. Number one, I think probably everybody picked it up. Yoel Armia can't play top line minutes, man. Suzuki and Hoffman even set him up for 4 or 5 gimmies tonight, and I don't think he got a shot off.
Have you ever driven your car and then realized that back in the day that you had your parking brake on and you're like, that's why I can't move? Yoel Armia is the parking brake to Nick Suzuki's hockey life. That's what that was tonight. Okay, it's just honestly painful. I'll be honest, Andrew. We talked about it on Twitter. He's buyout. He's pure buyout bait. That's what you do the minute it opens. Yoel Armia, thank you very much. You're bought out. Go, have a great life. That's all you can do with him.
And Mark, can you just tell everybody how things work with the Armia buyout, because you've been kind of pushing the Armia buyout for a while now, and just the logistics of it so that people understand why it's most likely to happen.
Yeah. So in total, next year, his cap hit would be $33,000. Now, let's keep in mind, next year, you also have to put a lot of cap into the Cole Caulfield extension. So total, essentially what would happen is that next year you save 3.4 million. The year after that, you save 2.4 million. Okay, so that's your big savings the next 2 years. Now, then once the cap will start to go up, because that's what has been planned, the third and fourth year, it'll cost you $1.4 million each year. So total net savings is about $3 million. But the big one is that you're saving 3.4 next year when you're going to need it to sign a lot of these guys, and the year after, which is when all your contracts are coming up. So it's a net positive. I don't see why you wouldn't. And by the time that 1.4 million hits the books in year 3 and 4, honestly, Andrew, and I know this, I'm being flippant, but I don't think it'll matter.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think it's not necessarily about the salary itself not mattering. It's just the team is probably not going to be hyper competitive by then. If they make the playoffs in those years, it'll be because something crazy happened more than they're ready to win a Stanley Cup kind of thing. So it does make sense from that perspective. And another perspective here that I think, if you can't trade Yoel Armia,
You can't.
You're gonna have to play him, right? Or I guess you could put him in the American Hockey League as well, but I feel like then you've got like that
You know
just
what?
doesn't look great.
Yes, okay,
It's
that's
better
what it
to
is.
just it's just
NHL
better to
players
let him
would hate that.
be
Would
free.
hate that. It would make
Yeah.
you look so bad. Yeah, absolutely.
It does. So Sebastian Jackson brings up, who obviously we love.
Love
Says,
me some
when Alex
Sebastian Jackson.
Belzil, who he likes, is outscoring you at this point, your spot in the lineup is likely gone. And that's the thing. Like, how can you look at Alex Belzil next
And not
year
say that he deserves that last spot. Yeah.
exactly? You have to at some point give
Just
spots to
pure
guys who
effort
deserve
level.
it.
Yeah. And sending a bad message to your team if you're, not everything can be meritocracy, right? Like Sean Farrell should have probably played the last few games. And I thought it was funny people brought up that, okay, by the way, Farrell played his 5th game, so he's into overage bonuses next year. You know what's going to cost the Canadians an overage bonus for him to play his 5th game? $25,000. It doesn't matter. And a lot of people were talking like that was a big deal. I'm like, who gives a shit? Like $25,000. That's how much they spent on Gatorade for a month, So it's not always a meritocracy in that sense. But at this point, if you're not rewarding Belzil for his strong work, and if you're not giving Hervé Pinard those opportunities that you've given Army in the past, it sends a really bad message to everyone in your organization. This is what you tell them to do: work hard, and make it. And Belzil made it from the 4th line. That's so hard to do. And I will say this: Belzil finished as one of the top 30 points per 60 players in the entire NHL.
Loving that 20% on ice shooting percentage for
it's gonna last forever there.
It's definitely not unsustainable.
I'm gonna shoot 25 forever.
I don't know what it actually is, but I assume it's really high.
Probably, I bet you it's closer to 30%
on ice.
Just vibes. Just Belzil has shooting vibes, man. He doesn't worry about that. Just gets there and he gets it done.
Yeah, Philip Rodriguez says, how do players see a buyout better or worse than being benched? I feel like there's some hurt pride involved, but they get money and the opportunity to sign somewhere else and recoup that money that may have been lost. So I think for a player who's struggling to find a space with the team, it's almost better than a trade because you also get the freedom to choose, right?
Yoel Armia at $1 million isn't that bad.
Yeah. That is the issue, is that Bergevin overpaid the guy based on playoffs.
Marc Bergevin lacked foresight? No, but seriously, it's fantastic. And yes, the pride thing, but also use it as motivation, right? Like F these guys, and you can restart your career. I remember asking Carl Alsner once, which I got to get back to him, because he said once he was out of hockey, he'd tell all. Really not happy with Marc Bergevin. But he was saying, in the long run, it sounds bad, but I regret having signed that contract with the Habs, because that essentially destroyed my career. He said, if I was a $2 million defenseman, and he was right. He's like, no one would even be talking about me. And that's really what I am. I am a $2 million defenseman. So even at the end, when they brought Alsner back, he was playing well, but it didn't matter because he's $4.5 million. So that whole helicopter ride to convince him to sign him anything, it ended up being like a Pyrrhic victory for Carl Alsner. So, but at the same time, Andrew, if someone comes up to you and says, here's $25 million, it's really hard to say like, maybe I'll regret this. Nah. You do that and you buy all the champagne and you have a good time and you worry about the future later.
Yeah, 100%. It's the same situation as like Wade Redden, right? Would he have gone back and not signed that big contract if he knew that he was going to have to spend however many years he did in the American Hockey League? Maybe, but also like you can't turn down that money. It's impossible to convince yourself to take less because like, oh, maybe one day I'll be not in the lineup. Like it doesn't.
These careers do not last very long. And one thing that Carl Alsner told me that really kind of got to me is like, what really sucks is when my kids ask me like, hey, daddy, like the Canadians are playing, like, why aren't you playing? It's like, oof. That's like the human side of it. And a lot of people say, hey man, you had money, so it didn't matter. I agree. Money solves so many problems, but not pride and not your just your value, your self-worth. That's something that you can't put a price on. And that's unfortunately something that happens when you're stuck in the HL. So no matter what, I think they love buyouts. Buyouts are essentially made to punish the team and give the player a nice chunk of money so he can restart his career. So yeah, everyone 100%. Loves a buyout.
All right. And speaking of Carl Alsner and negativity, Joel Edmondson. Man.
He's so nice too. He's so nice. I feel so bad every time. Like, he's so bad. He's so bad.
I don't know if this season, like the only way that this season could have ended in a way that tanked his value worse is if he was just injured the whole time. Like if he came back.
Even then, I'm not sure that's worse because like at least you're like, oh, when he comes back, but he came back, right? Oh my God.
But like I feel like you'd have questions about whether he could play, but now he's answering that question and it's no. He
looks like Douglas Murray out there. I'll be like.
I mean, I forget if it was you or if it was somebody on
Probably.
Twitter, like the last game, but it was talking about like 3 or 4 games in a row now.
Oh, Mike
You
mentioned that, but
can
yeah,
you can watch teams isolate
right from
Joel Edmondson, attack him, and immediately score.
which game was it where they just skated at him and eventually he just took himself like right out of the play, was behind the net by the time the guy shot. I think it might have been New Jersey.
It
I
might
don't
have been
know.
all of
Anyways,
them.
yeah, that's the other part. And I feel bad too because genuinely a good guy, but leadership. Let's just be honest. That was a code word for saying nobody offered anything for Joel Edmondson. That being said, you keep him around for one more year, but I don't see a team. Andrew disagrees with me. Let me know how wrong I am in the chat. I don't see a team, even with all the old white dudes that really love the rough and tumble guys. I don't see anyone offering the Canadians anything over future, not even future consideration. I think you have to pay to get rid of Joel Edmondson's last season.
Yeah, I mean, Trizak brings up a good point. Is he bad or is he injured now? And there's literally
Yes,
no one
the
else
answer,
that can play.
the
The
answer,
answer is
that,
yes to both.
that's exactly
Like,
what I said to Andrew, right? I'm like, I think they're like, he has no choice right now. He's hurt, but he can't come out of the lineup. So yeah, it looks bad.
he's Sam Montembeault from last year, right? Like, I guess you give him credit for that. I'd be interested to see if he can like heal over the summer, but like we said that
Heal
last
what?
year, it's a like the
It's
back
a chronic
injuries.
issue.
I know
Chronic,
it's
by
not going away.
definition, does not heal.
I
Like,
think I could see a GM trading for Edmondson if they believe that he can get back to what he was even at
they
the
are
beginning
Arizona. Is that?
yeah, Arizona. If he retires, Arizona will be all over him. But if he can get back to what he was in like the middle chunk of this year before he got hurt the second time,
Yes, there was a
you
middle
know, like
chunk. We
the middle
focus on the
chunk.
middle chunk. That middle chunk was nice, and he
Yeah,
actually looked
that
okay.
like
Yeah,
10 game sample size,
yeah, that
but like
sweet middle chunk. Yeah,
really, if at the end of this season he was still playing this poorly, but he was chopping guys to bits and taking penalties and being physical, I 100% think a GM would trade for
he can
him
hardly
without
move.
hesitation. But he can't be physical right now,
No,
so
absolutely.
I don't
And
see it happening.
it's unfortunate, but as Noel mentioned here, well, the French version of the saying is "Si est bon dans la chambre, on laisse dans la chambre." If he's good in the room, you leave him in the room, right? So I am all for leadership and all that. I just don't think that dragging your team on the ice will ever, be less or more valuable. Or sorry, you can never compensate with your leadership for dragging your team on the ice. I just don't believe in that. And when you're saying you have to have Edmondson for leadership, I feel it's insulting to guys like Gallagher and Matheson and Suzuki and Savard and the 50 other guys who can point to that have leadership. So
Yeah,
I honestly think there was no bites on Joel Edmondson. And let's be honest, as was pointed out, he's probably injured right now. So it's kind of unfair of us, but I just don't see any team giving anything for Joel
yeah.
Edmondson.
And
Anything.
the fact is, we have to analyze what we see, right? We can't believe in fantasy that he's going to not be this player next season, right? Like we can't just be like, well, obviously his back is going to be fixed next year. Like backs aren't like that.
Never.
As a
Not in
person with a
hockey,
bad
never.
back, they just don't heal.
No,
It's
absolutely.
just-
Hey, we have a comment here from Carl talking about the Islanders power play. I will say this, as someone that has watched one of the worst power plays in the league for the last few years, wow, that is an awful power play.
Hey, they scored though.
Did they? Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Okay. You know what? They did score but man, that is going to be their biggest issue in the playoffs, right? Because they're a team that has to get hot on special teams, I think. And if I remember correctly, their penalty kill is okay, but that power play, there's a reason it's last in the league. It's wow, that's some bad power play.
It is. It's not great. It's not great. All right, Mark, should we give everyone our potential starting lineups for next season?
Sure.
I'm just
absolutely.
trying to like write
haven't given
things
it
down.
any thought whatsoever. So let's do this. Let's jump right into it. And we're mentioning in the chat, I'm a big fan of this from Canty Canadian. Give Mike Matheson an A. Yeah, absolutely. Like you have to.
Yeah,
Even,
100%.
I don't want to be mean to Joel Edmondson, but even if he's back next year, you give that to Mike Matheson. It's no harm, no foul. You don't want to be mean, but Mike Matheson will be part of the future. He's a leader on this team, both on and off the ice. What we saw with those comments when Weidman kind of got cranky, hey, we all get cranky when we miss our nap. That happens. But Matheson came out with the most mature stuff, and he was putting the blame on the Habs. I love that. It was a real sign of leadership. So Mike Matheson, to me, already established himself as a big leader for the Canadiens.
Yeah, I really enjoyed Mike Matheson. I don't even want to say blame, but it was like taking the onus
yeah,
on the team, right?
Exactly.
It was
Taking
like
the onus away
it's
from
on
them, yeah.
us to not be put in that embarrassing situation. And
I
at the
love
same
that.
time, I
I
agree
love
with you.
that.
I wouldn't hold it against Chris Weidman either. Uh,
No.
okay, so here's the rules for the lineup for next year.
Okay.
We can't assume that they get Bedard. I would assume at this point.
Poos had Andrew has Bedard in his lineup.
I mean,
you got called on it already.
Of course, no. I mean, I think what we have to assume is that they draft between 5 and 7, and that player is not in the NHL to start the year because they really shouldn't be.
Yeah, whether it's like Will Smith, Zach Benson, or Mishkov, they're not going to be in the NHL next year. No.
Right. So
do we?
You can assume that there's a trade that happens.
So Pierre-Luc Dubois is in the lineup or not?
You can make that choice yourself. I'm going to assume that he is.
Oh, damn. Okay. Big moves here. Big moves.
I mean, Friedman said 95%. I'm going to trust 95%.
And every single insider, they don't want to say like for sure, but even his agent, when he got asked about it, he's like, well, people do stuff, and then he just went on this tangent and he never answered. So yeah, it's looking pretty likely. Okay, so can I put Crosby and Ovechkin in my starting lineup as we spoke
No, because they're not unrestricted, man.
Oh yeah, it's true. We need that 1 year. Yeah, when are the UFAs?
Well, I mean, I would assume that like Hoffman's not going to get traded in the offseason. I'm just trying to like make this as I'm going as well.
No, saying that I want to rip the A off Edmondson's jersey, but eye contact the whole time. Like, look at me, Joel. Like, this is what you get for having chronic back issues. Okay, so is Pierre-Luc Dubois your number one center?
No, still Suzuki.
Okay, Suzuki, Caulfield.
Yeah, I've got Suzuki, Caulfield, and Raphael Harvey Pinard.
Man, as much as I love this guy and I've been a big RHP booster, does that not feel like just wishful thinking? I guess it doesn't really matter next year, and I guess you might as well see what he can do. But
listen, 5 assists.
You're right. And the thing is, his ice time, his production, like definitely cratered when he got to those top line minutes too, right? So that's something we need to keep an eye on. However, his power play numbers went up. So his 5-on-5 cratered and his power play went up.
I mean, his 5-on-5 numbers will probably get a little bit better when Cole Caulfield's back too, because I mean, Suzuki at 5-on-5 has struggled to produce throughout his career without Cole Caulfield, right? So
okay, well, I'm gonna switch up then. I like your first two. I'm gonna put Brendan Gallagher on that top line.
All right, I'm cool with that.
Although
give
I'm
Gallagher a
Evans
chance
Gallagher,
to excel.
right? That's a bit, but whatever. I honestly think, and Andrew, you're the one that put it in my mind at the beginning of this year. You're like, why not Gallagher? He works out perfectly now. Pretty small line, but I wouldn't worry about that either.
No, I wouldn't worry about that either. I mean, this lineup also, it's going to show like what our philosophies are, I think, as well. Like what can work, what can't work. But guys like Pizzetta, for me, I really love what he did this year, but I don't see a spot for him next year unless there's like a bunch of injuries heading into training camp. So my second line is Slavkovsky with Dubois and Anderson to start the year. And that's my big boys line, as they love to say.
So how long until Kirby Doc takes Raphael Harvey-Pinard's spot on that first line then in your situation? Because now you're dropping Kirby Doc to the third line, right?
Exactly.
I don't mind that.
I don't mind that either. I think because it's not a situation where it's a third line that's getting 12 minutes, right?
Mm-hmm.
My third line is Farrell with Doc and Gallagher.
Gallagher. Okay, hold on. For your second line, I like the Slavkovsky and Doc. That's where I throw Raphael Harvey-Pinard.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Instead of Anderson.
Yeah, I would like to see. I know I'm going to sound like a Josh Anderson, but I'd like to see Raphael Harvey-Pinard kind of pick up some garbage. And I think with a guy like Slavkovsky, it'll kind of show the lead, create a little more space for him. So yeah, I like that we both have Slavkovsky though on our second lines. Like that's, but in my situation,
it's a lot of hope.
Well, I guess I have a worse roster. I just straight up, right?
Oh, you're not taking Dubois?
Well, I mean,
it's a big assumption.
Honestly, if I'm the Habs, I don't know. That's my call. I said it from the beginning. And if he really wants to prove it, prove it. I know that you're a francophone, you want to come home, but everyone else that said this, it's been bullshit till the end. The Habs have been used by these francophones at the end of their careers. Become our francophone fier. Like I'm talking.
He's only like 24, so it's not the end of his career.
It's great that now someone in his prime for once, but prove it. Go one more year, force your way in, and man, Winnipeg's gonna hate you for life. But I want to see him straight up come to the Habs for free. That's what I want. Yeah.
Pusam Poos says, I bet Bedard could play defense on my lineup. You know what? He's going goalie. All right. Connor Bedard, he's changed into a goalie.
Yeah.
Somebody asking about Wah. He needs the American Hockey League.
AHL. And in my world, Sean Farrell, he's in the AHL next year. Let's be perfectly honest.
He might be, right? I mean,
he looked pretty good tonight, but I just don't see him being NHL ready next year. No.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, also you got so many players that you got to move around, right, to make this happen. So my fourth line is Guryanov, Evans, Hoffman. Much more offensive fourth line than what they've iced in recent years. So it makes I feel like this is a way. I feel
bad for Jake Evans, like
yeah, he's gonna have to carry the bag defensively
and just like effortlessly. I still think Mike Hoffman has top 9 potential. Like, I love the idea of having him on a fourth line, but can the Canadiens afford that as a luxury? And he'll quickly get bumped up, won't he? Well, like, this is a guy that still scored 15 goals this year. Or I stopped.
The way I see it is Hoffman's gonna get power play time no matter what, just because of his shot. And if like Farrell struggles, you bump Hoffman up. If Slav struggles, you could bump Guryanov up for a bit or Hoffman. So you've got some malleability on the wings there.
He's going to finish the season as the Canadiens' 4th best goal scorer.
Hoffman,
Hoffman, yeah. Now that's not saying much.
Yeah. So I think I'm looking at defense pairings.
So what happened to Christian Dvorak? If I can ask, what is he?
He got banished to the Phantom Zone.
Like, what's going on with Dvorak? He's still alive, right?
He is out for the season. I assume Christian Dvorak will not be back next year.
I wouldn't be surprised if they get some hits on him, just because he did produce a little bit, and just defensively he should be still okay, right? So you think he'll get moved next year? Okay, so no Armia, no Drouin, no Dvorak. Man, he's been busy. It's been a busy summer for Kent. And so, but they don't bring anyone else other than Pierre-Luc Dubois in this situation?
Yeah, in my situation, yeah, that's like the only major move, right?
And Guryanov, did you actually sign him for 2.9 and then come to it? Like, did you offer him a qualifying, or did you handshake and bring him to something? Because he's not worth $3 million, let's be honest.
At 2.9, it really doesn't bother me, just based on the potential. But I wouldn't give him more than a year. Like, he has to prove it to get more than that. Like, you're not giving him term.
Okay. Well, you know what I would go for on my case? So my second line, my third line, I like having Josh Anderson on there, and I like having Mike Hoffman. I would like to see Jesse Ylönen in the lineup next year, honestly. I think the one thing that the Canadiens lack desperately, Andrew, and we've seen it, because Cole Caulfield is going to finish as their best goal scorer, right? Or is Nick going to pass him? Oh, one game left to do it.
He has to get 2 in the last game against Boston. That's pretty tough.
Yeah, so they need shooting talent, and which is the main reason I'm not completely off the Guryanov train, because he has that shooting talent. However, his shot rate has just completely collapsed. I want to see Jesse Ylönen on the third line next year. I think you need that shooting talent.
Yeah, I see Ylönen as a guy who can, again, slot in for Farrell if Farrell doesn't get off to the start that we expect. If he's not ready next year, I think he can go in there. He might actually fit better with Doc and Gallagher, because he's more of a finisher and Farrell's more of a playmaker. And, like, Gallagher's going to be your net front guy. He's going to score on fewer shots than you want because he can't shoot. And Doc is more of a playmaker, but developing his scoring touch as well. And Ylönen could benefit from playing with those guys. It'd be better line mates than he's had, right?
I think so.
It'd be a really good situation.
And as
extras, I had Belzil, obviously.
Yeah.
And Ylönen was my other extra.
Claire is keeping us honest here, and she's like, "Where's Ylönen?" But see, in this situation, everyone's healthy, so we could actually run until like 19 or 20 here. Like, it's a little
true. We're actually going to do 8 lines for the team.
Yeah, exactly. Line number 7. So Tierney's beside Paul Byron and Alex Belzil. Okay, on defense.
Yeah.
What are you seeing for movement here? Because I that's where I'm the most confused. But I wouldn't be surprised if one of Savard or Edmondson somehow moves.
Yeah, I'm assuming that Edmondson is gone. Whether
him and Dvorak
him and Dvorak have vanished into the ether.
Bed and breakfast, and they're opening a bed and breakfast, and everything's gonna be cool. That's good with them. Okay, so Edmondson's gone. Mike Matheson's your number 1D. Who's playing top pairing with him?
100%. So I went for a balanced approach to the D, because the way that the way that St. Louis and his coaching staff runs the D, I feel like it just doesn't make sense to load up.
I can feel
all of
this
them.
is you're gonna defend not putting Goalie there, and right now Kay's just like about to reach out and strangle you. You can't
There's a
justify
reason,
not having
though.
Goalie. All right, justify.
There's a
it.
reason though. My first and second pairing would have essentially the exact same amount of ice time.
Yeah.
My second pairing is Goalie Byron. I want to see them together because Byron has really not had a partner consistently who isn't an anchor, except for when he plays with Mike Matheson, and both of them are such risk takers.
Just chaotic, yeah.
Yeah, that it doesn't really work. So I think Goalie has that ability to.
I like that.
Not only be like, he's not really like stay at home, but he gets
he's
back into
in his
plays.
own zone. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he's a stopper. He can support Byron with and without the puck because he's a good puck mover as well. I think that will also really boost Goalie's numbers. But my top pairing is, this may not work. I'm sketched out about it, but if you're balancing it and not like putting one pairing on all the heavy minutes, I want to see Matheson with Arbor Xhekaj.
I have the feeling you're going to go there.
Right?
Is Martin St. Louis really going to start? Because let's be honest, Matheson's playing what, 49 and a half minutes a game?
Yeah, so and you can't have them both out there for that. Like extra time, you'd have probably Goalie taking extra shifts with Matheson instead.
Okay. And your third pairing, which I think I love, I'd actually maybe bump it to my second behind Matheson and Goalie, although they'd be offside. But so you're going with Harris
Kovacevic. Yeah, they're so good together. And again, not a real third pairing. I think they're closer to a second pairing.
Yes. And they essentially were for most of the year. Like it got weird halfway through the season. I think they lost faith in Kovacevic, which is weird because he doesn't look that good out there. But man, statistically, he's been one of their best defensemen. So I like consistent. That. I like the idea there that you're giving Justin Byron someone that can alleviate the pressure and also, play that offensive game without worrying, without, losing track of what happens in his own zone. I don't know if Arbor Xhekaj can handle my top pairing. Honestly, Andrew, he'd get destroyed. He'd get destroyed top pairing. I think.
That's why I'm talking about like balancing.
Yes.
Not necessarily throwing it. Like I'm talking in a way that I would do it, not the way an NHL coach would do it. So this is like my ideal lineup, right? So I think that Arbor Xhekaj, he's not ready to be thrown into top pairing minutes. I think Goalie is the only one, maybe Harris, that has demonstrated that ability at this point without getting completely crushed. I think Goalie, his offense kind of disappears in that situation, but his defense is actually quite good. Like and even though his like percentage numbers are terrible in those minutes, he actually has quite a strong impact defensively. It's just the offense completely disappears.
Yeah, and we're talking about 30 early games with David Savard where the team was like, let's be honest, they were winning, but they weren't. They're getting outshot significantly. A good point brought up by Jaxer is that Byron and Goalie actually played together at the World Juniors, I believe, right? So
there you go.
That would be a fun little pairing. I still have a lot of faith in Justin Byron. It's just as soon as he stops moving, he's like a shark. He'll just die. Like there's something about the processing goes a little awry when there's a little bit of pressure. He stops moving. So if he relies just on his instincts and he gets stuff done real quick, Byron looks good. When he has a little too much time to think, that's where he starts losing pucks right in front of the net. So, but Goalie is your best bet there to have like a safety net around Justin Byron. I agree.
Yeah, Trinka brings up that Matheson can be sneaky dirty sometimes, and that's something that I want to see. Like that pairing to me, I don't know if it'll work. Obviously, like it's fully just in my brain, putting it together, thinking this is my thoughts on it. Right? I want to put Arbor Xhekaj in a position where, man, you just got to play. Because if you stop and worry about fighting and like trying to intimidate too much, you're gonna get caught behind. Because
Matheson's go down.
Matheson's go all the time. Yeah. So like if he focuses on just playing because he has no choice, maybe that brings like more out of him, and he becomes a better player. And for Matheson, who agreed he can be sneaky dirty sometimes, if you're playing with Arbor Xhekaj, man, Mike Matheson, we love you. You get to be an absolute prick now because nobody's going to touch you.
Absolutely. Like go full Sean Avery. I the only issue here, also we like magically got rid of Savard and Edmonds. I guess Savard's your 7 in this situation.
Yeah, he would essentially go into the Chris Weidman role, but I mean, injuries, right? He's probably going to play 70 games.
No, you know what though, like he would be a really fun guy to have at 7 because I don't think him either. We always talk about Goalie getting the rough ride at the beginning of the year. So did Savard. Like Savard was never meant to play top pairing minutes ever.
I mean all year. all the last 2 years, really.
Exactly. So, like, out of all of them, when we talk about leaders too, he's probably the guy that I've said this before, but he reminds me of PK Subban, guys. He's just so fun. So yeah, I wouldn't mind keeping him around as a leader. What's crazy in all this, Andrew, is that we're penciling in essentially 5 rookies from this year. Like that's just absolutely nuts, man. That we're talking about a lineup for a rebuilding team with this many rookies. It blows my mind. Like, I would have never thought that this was possible. And we're talking about which rookies have to carry which veterans, other than Matheson. So yeah, I still don't love the idea of Arbor Xhekaj there, but I would love the idea of Arbor Xhekaj being right there outside of every scrum, and it would definitely keep people honest. I'll be perfectly honest. It's a refreshing change in Montreal to have that the Arbor Xhekaj factor.
Yeah, like I said, I'm not super confident in that. It's just I want to try it. Just because, why not be experimental when you don't have much of a chance of making?
And there's no one else, right? Who else are we looking at? William Trudeau might force his way in.
Either that, or there might be like a trade.
When I had to project this year at one point, I think I put beside Matheson UFA/draft pick. Like, that was my big question mark, and I had Xhekaj as my 7. So essentially, in my scenario, I lost Edmondson and Saval are also gone. But yeah, I think. Kent Hughes mentioned a few times before the season started he wanted to sign someone, or he did claim Kovacevic, but he wanted a good defenseman. So it wouldn't surprise me if he makes a bit of a move there to find someone to take those minutes, because as much as I love the idea of sharing minutes, we all know Martin St. Louis does not love sharing minutes on defense. I think it was Trinker or Trizak. It was both of them. They both said, you don't count how many minutes he played, you count how many minutes he didn't play. It's a lot easier that way for the for Mike Matheson. And man, he's so fun. What I love about him is he doesn't give a shit if it's 100-0 or tied 3-3. Like, Mike Matheson goes all out all the time, and I think that's a really, really good way to show actual leadership on the ice.
Yeah, 100%. He is great. Like, there's really nothing bad that I could say about Mike Matheson.
I mean, like,
and goalies, Mark, Carey Price. No, I'm just kidding.
Jakob Dobeš is coming in this situation, I assume.
Yeah, it's Montemo and Allen, right? Like, Allen's extension kicks in next year,
and
I don't think
more
he's
expensive.
Yeah,
more expensive. Yeah. But the good news here is, as we saw, so Caden Primo's kind of dragging. Well, not necessarily dragging, but he's doing pretty good. Well, pretty good. I have to really qualify this for Habs fans, because there's some that can get. He's had good and bad games, but he's playing much better now, and I think you can essentially roll on one more year with seeing what Caden Primo can do without any worry. Like, just give him the net in Laval, see what he can do. If he can get to the playoffs, find that groove he got last year. But I'm just convinced. I know a lot of people don't love this, but I'm not convinced the Caden Primo story is over in Montreal yet.
Well, I mean, we're talking about Sam Montembeault and the development that happened this year for him, and he's what, 26?
Yes.
Caden Primo's 23, so the towel doesn't need to be thrown in. I'm not confident in him, but he doesn't need to be amazing, right? Like, he can just be an NHL goaltender, and that is a long career.
No, absolutely. And we're seeing him right now respond to the pressure kind of well. And I don't think he got a fair shake this year when he was in Montreal. Every time Caden Primo starting for Montreal, it's because they're missing 99% of their team. Like, they're really, really bad in front of him. So the game, I believe it was at Philly. It wasn't his fault they lost. Now, the following game was really rough. But again, you're talking about Justin Barron giving away the puck, Edmondson giving away the puck. There was one floater. It was at Nashville, I guess. It's been hard to find a legitimate opportunity for Caden Primo in the NHL. And this is like 4 years after they promised him that he'd be playing in the NHL.
Yeah, it is a tough situation for him. And yeah, at least in Laval, his last 2 games have been like flat out spectacular.
And he's got like a 915 in March,
shots,
or a 919 in March, or something like that, Andrew. Like, that's fine. That's absolutely good for a guy who, don't forget, they're missing a lot of their best players. Now they've come back, but in March, through that climb back into the playoffs, they were missing most of their best players for most of the month. So Caden Primo, again, very polarizing subject, but I wouldn't hesitate to let Jakob Dobeš run with it if he gets hot, but I'm not ready to close the books on Primo. Not at all.
No, me either. Okay, what did you have for your pairings?
So essentially Magic. Evan mentions here in the chat, you can always dangle that first round pick, Florida's, for a right D. And I think really organizationally, you need a right D. You need another one. Like, you have to. I like Xhekaj and I like Kovacevic and Byron, but if Xhekaj, Kovacevic, Byron is who you're running on the right, that's thin, man, and I don't see
It
it
is.
ever evolving into anything.
Yeah. And it
Great.
all like the future of what the defense would look like, it almost necessitates a guy like Caden Gooley moving to the right unless you find someone, right? Because Lane Hudson is a couple years away probably, but
Yeah.
he's coming down that pipe and they have to find someone there
Mhm.
who can play with him and facilitate him being that like difference maker on defense. You can't have him
No, he'll get
with a guy
torched.
who's going to struggle on the right side.
He'll get torched if he's not paired with. And I know this is so old school. Like back in my day, we wore an onion on our belt because it was a style at the time, you know. But Lane Hudson does need someone that's defensively responsible. Absolutely. Like if they haven't watched him at Boston University, you won't have seen it, but it's great. His offense is through the roof, but defensively, there's several issues to work on. Also, Adam Engstrom could maybe go to the right. I asked Patrick Bexel, our friend Zeb Habs, on Twitter. Follow him if you haven't. He's just great info for prospects. And you know, Andrew, I've been the hyping Adam Engstrom so much this year. I think if Lane Hudson wasn't in the mix, he'd be by far the best defensive prospect. Like his numbers for under 20 Swedish league were just amazing. They're besides some of the all-time greats. And he skates like he's like, you know, on a suede covered cloud. Like it's just beautiful to watch him skate. He's on the left as well. However, someone asked me, can he play on the right? And I looked into it, and he can move to the right. And he's played with the U20 on the right, just very rarely. And I'm always hesitant to kind of say, hey man, like this is your new life now, because puck retrieval becomes very difficult. So, but maybe Adam Engstrom could eventually become a right-handed defenseman, or
Yeah,
not right-handed, but play on the right.
yeah, he's going to change handedness. No, I think it's also a little bit more challenging from guys coming over from Europe too, where like puck retrieval is different, right?
You have plenty of time.
You have less time now. The boards are a little bit different, and I think a lot more is made of adjusting from European ice hockey rink to
For defensemen,
a North American one. But for defensemen, I think it matters a lot more than forwards.
absolutely. And what we're hearing now is essentially Engstrom is what people kind of thought Norlinder was, Leskinen was, because he also has that size too, right? So I really like him, and I think he's going to be a huge part of the team. Obviously, he's not ready next year, so I go Mike Matheson with UFA. Is there a good right-handed UFA that Sidney Crosby is he UFA next year? What about Ovechkin? Either way,
If you can fill for a moment, I can look at who's available in UFA. But from
yes,
what I've heard, the free agent market is very thin this year.
it's ugly. Well, with you, and this is I'm can someone make sure K doesn't hurt me? Because I really like the idea of Jordan Harris and Kovacevic holding the fort on that second pairing. Like I absolutely love it. Because bar none, they have the best numbers together this year. And you'll actually see statistically when you go into all our nerd graphs, like across the league, they're having some of the best impact on any team in the NHL. So I love Kovacevic Harris together in the second pairing. And then I'd like to see, okay, it might be your first pairing in the K. I'm so sorry. It might be your first pairing in the future, but I wouldn't mind seeing, and man, I feel stupid saying this, but that's never stopped me before. Caden Gooley beside Arbor Jackeye on a third pairing, because first of all, you're giving him a much easier go at it. This year was just throwing him to the wolves, you know, baptism by wolves, not just by fire, by wolves. And obviously I kind of fear for how many big hits he's taken, because he's taken a lot this year. We saw like Caden Gooley went through just a physical shit show this year. Having Arbor Jackeye beside him would be fun. And, you know, you can move around with him later. So I guess I'm stupid for putting Gooley on the third pairing, but that's kind of how I see it right now, breaking down. You could just flip the Harris and Gooley pairing if you'd like. But statistically speaking, Harris and Kovacevic have been the best pairing that the Canadiens have had this year.
Yeah, okay. I found the guy that the Canadiens should sign.
Mhm.
And I think this should be very uncontroversial, and Rachel Dory is going to like it. Damon Severson
Oh, boom.
from
There
the
you
New
go.
Jersey Devils. There
Thumbs
have been
up.
consistent rumors that the Devils won't be retaining him this year because he wants a bigger role. And, you know, they've got Luke Hughes coming. So, and they've got Nemec that's going to be breaking into the league. There's just fewer spots on the Devils lineup.
I
and
love
he's a
that
guy
idea.
who has, like, he's not amazing defensively. He's more of an offensive guy, but man, Damon Severson could fit on this team.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be fantastic. But is he signed, or is UFA? He's going to go straight to UFA?
Unrestricted free agent this
Done.
summer, I think.
What is he? He's a $4 or $5 million guy. Sure. Done.
Yeah, his salary last year was 5.1 million, so I'm assuming that he'd want more along the line. He's got 32 points this year. I'd say probably 6 mil a year.
Yeah,
6.5.
because this will be his last like good paying
He's
contract,
28.
right?
This is where he has to make bank.
Yeah, absolutely. And as my former colleague would say, you always have to have someone from Saskatchewan on your lineup. So that's important too. I just
He's
don't.
from Manitoba.
No, he's from Melville, Saskatchewan.
He's from Brandon, Manitoba, according to Cat Friendly. That's where he was born anyway.
Oh, okay. Well, then Elite Prospects thinks he was born somewhere else.
Maybe he's from Saskatchewan but was born in Manitoba. That happens. But yeah, I think if Damon Severson was a Montreal Canadian, there'd be a lot of happy folks.
Absolutely. And it takes some, like, I love the idea that this year they went with those 5 rookies, but man, it hasn't been friendly deployment. It would be pretty cool if you could shelter them a little bit. I think Martin St. Louis, if he could have, he would have sheltered his rookies a little bit. But like, do you really think that he's starting with Caden Gooley on his top pairing with David Savard if he had a choice?
No. I think Gooley fits there more than Savard does.
But you had to have insurance for Gooley there, and they did not, right?
Yeah, I will say, from the guy who put Arbor Xhekaj on his first pairing, this probably won't go over very well with a lot of people who really love Arbor Xhekaj, but don't be surprised if he starts the season in Laval next year. I think he's got a lot of work to do to like round out his game, and it is a numbers game. They've got 5 guys who are going to be sophomores next year.
Right?
Like, it doesn't mean that he's regressed.
No.
But I think he could benefit just like Byron did this year from spending a half season or even a full season in Laval.
Yeah, absolutely. Good night, Matthew. Mathieu Landry is heading out. I'll say this. His numbers were actually, like, you know this, Andrew. They were not just like good for a guy that jumped straight from which is crazy, right? The fact that he jumped straight from Kitchener to make the NHL as an unsigned defenseman like that, or an undrafted defenseman, I think is literally unheard of. Like, literally, it's never happened. And his numbers were pretty good. And then when the fights started accumulating and where the focus got into fighting, his numbers started going down a little bit. And by the end of the year, they weren't great.
Yeah, I agree. Yep. I mean, the thing is, like, I don't think Jordan Harris might be the only one who is immune to possibly starting the season in Laval. Maybe Caden Gooley, but because of the amount of injuries that he suffered this year, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe he has a rough camp and he starts like 10 games in the American Hockey League next year. And then, like, I don't think he's going to stay there long. Like, no. I would assume that he plays 60 to 70 games next year in the NHL, provided he's healthy. But the advantage that the Canadiens have right now is that because they're not looking to make a big statement in making the playoffs next year or anything like that, they can be patient with these guys. And if they do struggle, they can send them down and let them work on their game. Like, it's easy to get bogged down in the game to game. Like, I remember when I was younger and like the Canadiens scratched PK Subban in his rookie season for like 1 game. And I was freaking out. Like, how could they do this? He's their best defenseman.
I think we
already.
both wrote like long theses about like,
exactly. And then you hear from
the franchise.
And then you hear from PK about it years later, and he's like, yeah, my dad called Jacques Martin and said, scratch his ass. He needs to sit and watch. That's hilarious. I think that's hilarious. And like, sometimes you can learn something from that. So it's easy to get bogged down in the game to game thing. Sometimes you have to take the long view. So if your favorite guy starts in Laval next year, don't worry so much. It doesn't mean that they regressed.
Guys like Riley Kidney and Joshua Roy as well will probably be starting there, if we're being perfectly honest. Yeah, no, Slavkovsky, Kay's asking you to keep Slav up. Listen, I would have no issue starting him in the AHL and leaving him there for a nice chunk of the year, but I think the Habs are going to want him in the NHL because then they're actually essentially admitting that they made a mistake this year when they didn't send him. That being said, if we go back to Xhekaj for one moment, Kay brings up another good point, is that she wouldn't want him fighting all the many, many goons in the AHL. I agree, but he's established himself now at this point. Like he doesn't have to take every fight. This year, it really felt like he was under pressure to break through like a decade of insecurity with Habs fans and Habs players. But I don't think that'll be the case next year. Like, he's essentially established himself as a mean motherfucker. So he's not going to have to fight every single player in the AHL if he goes down.
Yeah, I think he's like a different weight class, I think, too. Like, if a journeyman fighter comes after Arbor Xhekaj, I feel like the onus is kind of on the coach to tell him, like, listen, you don't have to do this.
And yeah, if there's a Delaurier, if there's a legit heavyweight, you don't have to fight him. Like Arbor Jacka is a light heavyweight or maybe even closer to a middleweight, right? So yeah, no, you don't have to do that.
Trizak asks, do the Habs use LTIR next season or spend less and keep Price on IR instead? They put Price on LTIR and try to weaponize the cap space like they did with Monahan. 100%. Like,
yeah,
they may not be able to do it, but they will be calling every phone number that they know.
But they're I mean, Carey Price's contract will retire in the desert. It's just a matter of when. Let's be perfectly honest with that. Noel says here, if he goes to NHL and isn't ready again with the Habs, isn't that more egg on their face? Absolutely. Now, the big thing
I don't think it is. I think it makes more sense to me to start. You're talking Slavkovsky, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it makes more sense to me that they start Slavkovsky, unless he has a terrible camp. Like if he comes in unprepared, then of course that's different. But let's say he comes in prepared, but he starts the season kind of slow, and they send him to the American Hockey League. I think what I want to see is send him down there for 20 plus games. Not like what the Canadiens did with Caulfield, where he went down as soon as he scored a goal. They're like, back up. And it's the same stupid Ducharme tactic of like breaking his confidence. I want to see
beatings will
him
continue until morale improves. That was
exactly right.
Ducharme way, yeah.
Like, I don't think that it's even admitting a mistake. I think it's just you do what is best for the kid's development, and you have to put blinders on to the perception of other people and focus on what's best for Juraj Slavkovsky. And if that's the American Hockey League, that's the American Hockey League.
Yeah. And they came and they genuinely thought about sending him to the World Juniors, and they genuinely thought about sending him back to the AHL or not making him, make the team. However, I do believe they made mistakes in every single one of those. Every time they came together and said, hey, should we do this with Slavkovsky? They always came to the conclusion that now he's better off in the NHL. I think they have to maybe reevaluate their process if that's how they came to the conclusion every time. I find they've really shown signs of like recency bias with Slavkovsky, not just when they drafted him, but for example, when they decided not to send him to the World Juniors, it was because he was in the top 6 and he was producing great. The minute they decided to not send him, which is a management decision, St. Louis decided that's the end of his top 6 time. Well, you have a bit of a kind of a mismatch of communication there. So I think management needs to be on the same page as St. Louis. And I'll say this, I think St. Louis deserves to have a little more clarity next year going forward, because I really feel like there were fingers in the pie, man, coming from upstairs. And you could tell he was getting frustrated with, play this guy so we can trade him. You ended up getting what? Juryanov. That's okay. But I don't know if it was worth it to have those complicated ice times with all these rookies getting, not getting their ice time. So next year, I'd like to see carte blanche for Martin St. Louis, because honestly, Andrew, I don't think you can even evaluate him this year.
No, it's tough. I think the other factor in like the decision whether or not to send down Slavkovsky, remember at the beginning of December, he started playing with Sean Monahan and there was real chemistry there, right? Yeah. And at this time, Doc is up on the first line. And then when Monahan goes out to injury, they don't immediately put Doc back at center, right? It takes a while for them to make that decision. And when they do, Doc thrives, obviously, but by that time, Slavkovsky's injured. So there's this period of time where between Monahan getting injured and Slavkovsky getting injured, so many fucking injuries, my God.
And the suspension, too, is really weird for his usage this year. Like,
right.
No
so,
consistency.
I think that decision was made while he had a situation that was working for him.
Yeah.
And at that point in time, I totally agree with the Montreal Canadiens that sent him down to play junior hockey.
Yep.
It didn't make sense. And I feel like a lot of that Slavkovsky should have been in the World Juniors stuff came after the World Juniors were over and people saw Shane Wright in the gold medal game. I think he scored the gold medal winning goal. No,
Joshua Roy set up.
But Shane Wright was very impactful in that game, right? It was his best game of the tournament. And I think there was a lot of looking at that, and therefore the Canadiens made a mistake, which is like, that's post hoc ergo proctor hoc. Like we can't do results based analysis on player development.
We all know a little bit of Latin there, Andrew. We all you, but yeah, no, I agree. To me, it was more that, like, again, he was playing well, but you had to keep him in the top 6 at that point for him to keep playing well. And I know without Monahan, but still, he went right down to that 4th line. And let's be honest, he got the least amount of ice time of any rookie 18 years old in the history of the franchise. Like, that's not a good sign. Less ice time than Galchenyuk, less ice time than Kotkaniemi. So for all the reasons, and yeah, I agree with you. It was actually the right call not to send him down, and there was definitely some Captain Hindsight thing. It wasn't a good year of usage from the Canadiens for Slafkovsky.
No.
They did not help his development, and in my opinion, they were the bust. The Habs were the bust in that year. Slafkovsky is not a bust, but next year. So all this going back to the beginning, they said, remember Le Cavalier said, "Oh, I was like him in my year 1. Year 2 is great. In year 2, Le Cavalier got over 20 minutes average of ice time. If you give Slafkovsky that ice time, sure, I'll be happy, but I don't see it happening. You do need to give him more consistency next year. Start fresh, forget everything except for what Adam Nicholas taught you, and keep him. You have to give him good line mates, man. This stuff of being on the 4th line with Jake Evans, I love Jake Evans, but potentiel dans la poubelle at that point. So I really think they need to set up Slafkovsky to succeed next year. And to me, for that means top 6.
Yeah, it's top 6 or the American Hockey League where he
Bingo.
can be like the big guy, right? And I'm totally with you on where he should have been this year. Like I think you and I both at the beginning of the year were like, he plays his 9 games, then he should go to the American Hockey League and dominate there. But obviously the Canadiens disagreed. Who knows if he would have played the whole season, if maybe they would have been proven right. I kind of doubt it just by the way the season went. He wasn't going to get the great line mates anyway. Maybe he would have really clicked with Jonathan Drouin at center. You never know. But I'm still excited to see what Slafkovsky can turn into.
Me too. I last year's nothing. I completely just ignore what happened last year completely. Just write it off. And, this idea that he's a bust or whatever, that's just silly. Now, we have to keep in mind, it was one of the weaker drafts, right? Like Slafkovsky wouldn't be going top 5 in most drafts. So it's going to be a longer project in that respect. But I'll be honest, Andrew, I don't see much value what happened this year. Le Cavalier, all them, they said I'm wrong. Oh, he gained experience. I know he did. I don't know how much value it was. I think you probably have a higher opinion of the experience he gained this year, right?
I think it's more about like working with Adam Nicholas every day, right? Like from what I've heard, he goes to Laval like every 2 weeks or something like that. So if there's value to be had, there's value in reps for sure, but I think it's more value working with the skills coach day in and day out than anything.
He's raw talent. You're right. He's pure raw talent right now.
Very raw, right? Noel says a Leafs fan told him that Slav is just not number 1 pick material. Here's the thing, that draft, like the Canadiens, they got the number 1 pick, but Slafkovsky shouldn't have been in the NHL. There's not a single player from last year's draft who should have been in the NHL year 1. And that's pretty rare. Yeah. Like it wasn't a great draft for top end talent. It was very deep when you look down, like throughout the Canadiens especially had a very, very good draft. Probably a good chunk of NHLers.
And when you look at Lane Hudson, Owen Beck, and Cedric Guindon, like just going down the list, even if you take out the first round, which Méchard, I know people are way too harsh on him. Listen, new guy, but even if you take out their first round picks, the Habs might have had the best draft last year.
Yep.
It was that good down the stretch.
It really was. And there's just a lot of things that can happen with the Canadiens that can change perceptions on that draft, right? Like Sebastian Jackson says, it might be 8 years before we know who the best pick in the 2022 draft was. It might be, right? It's going to be interesting. It might end up being Lane Hudson.
There you go. Or Owen Beck. I still maintain, and I got a bit in trouble with this because I said it on a broadcast after they got drafted. I'm like, I still think Simon Nemec and Jiricek were the 2 best players in that draft. I know everyone is obsessed with forwards, but to me, in terms of having defensemen that can have long impact in the NHL, those were the guys you were looking for. And also the Russian defenseman. What was his name? I keep forgetting.
I don't know.
Anyways, to me, those were the great defensemen. But the Habs weren't ever going to draft a defenseman first overall. Absolutely not.
Well, and most teams don't, right? Like, who was the last defenseman taken first overall? Was it like Eric Johnson?
Oof,
it was Owen Power just a couple of years ago.
Owen Power, exactly. But
before
very
that,
rarely.
It was a
Rasmus
very
Dahlin?
long time.
Wasn't Rasmus Dahlin right before it?
Yeah, and Sebastian Jackson, who continually gives us Philip Michar, he says he's a stud and he will die by that statement. Like,
it's great because Sebastian pointed out that even though he took 0 shootouts this year, Michar was ranked the second best shootout artist in his conference. It probably stems from, I think he had a penalty shot where he just absolutely looked fantastic in it, and his breakaways look great. But yeah, Philippe Méchard, man, You know how tough it is to go to a hotel for 1 weekend? It kind of screws up your whole vibe. Moving to another country with a new coach, a new team, a new teammates, new food, new rink, new house, new everything, new sleep schedule, new language. It's so tough, man. At 18 years old, he's just a little baby. So expect big things from Philippe Machard next year.
Yeah, 100%. And Noel says he'd be sad if Slav has his soul crushed. I wouldn't worry
He
about
would
that.
never. He doesn't. I'm not worried about that one bit.
Yeah, I think he's just got crazy confidence, and I think that more than his on-ice work so far gives me confidence that he'll reach some level of his potential, because if a guy just fully believes that he will be that good and continues to like have that hard-working attitude, they will become an NHLer. Like, he has the skills to be a very good NHLer.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of putting them together and doing the work to do that. So
although
he's got a good attitude.
What I will say about that is that last year at one point, between the draft and dev camp, like I spoke to him 4 or 5 times for on-air stuff. And right before we went on live at dev camp, like I could tell he was getting tired. I'm just like, how are you holding up, buddy? And he's like, it's a lot. Like, he actually admitted, man, this is a lot to go nonstop. It's like, I have to do 15 more things. He kind of lost his smile a little bit. I'm not saying that it got to him, but what I am saying is that this year, not having to do 1,000 interviews around the world before training camp, it'll allow him to focus a little bit better. So yeah, I'm expecting really good things from Slavkovsky, just because the Canadiens are a little more aware of what they need to do, and he will have a lot less superfluous crap flying around him.
100%. And Ramelli brings up that he'll play with Bedard next year, so it'll be fine. And on that note, great note to end it on. So thanks everybody for watching. We've got one more show this year. Tomorrow.
Love the chat. Shout out to everyone in the chat. Our favorite people.
Every single person. Marc will be back. Laurie Bennett will be with us.
Ooh,
and
Laurie.
I know we talked about doing a charity drive on the last show of the year internally because of Easter weekend and my oldest having a full week off because of the ice storm here in Montreal. We just weren't able to put things together quick enough.
Also, there was some hobo on your couch, right? There was some guy
yes,
that was just...
Marc was staying at our house, so there was that to deal with as well. My God, no, he was great. But the charity drive's not going to happen in the last game of the year. We're going to do it in the playoffs. So game over Winnipeg, game over Toronto, game over Edmonton. I was like, who else is there? Oh, right, the team that I picked to win the Stanley Cup. They're going to be pushing that charity drive every single game of the playoffs, and then provide none of those teams make the Stanley Cup final, which outside of Edmonton, game over Cup finals again, just like we did last year. And every one of those shows, we're going to be pushing this charity drive for the Alphabet Collective, which is a new hockey-based LGBTQ plus organization that supports that community, and we will continue. We will get as much donations as we possibly can working with them for the rest of the season or through the playoffs. All right, everyone.
And other than that, I just want to say one last time, thank you to everyone in the chat and everyone that listens and downloads, because we get a lot of comments on Twitter and other social media. Seriously, the support has been just fantastic, and I think it made a bad season much, much better. This has been a great bad season.
It has, considering the injuries, it should have been much worse than this.
As terrible seasons go, this one was freaking amazing, and it's because of everyone in the chat. So seriously, much love to all of you.
All right, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow.
Game over! Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada Sportsbook.